Hi, everybody. My name is Yogesh Javda. I am the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also the director for the Center for Marketing Solutions at the University of South Carolina. Today, I am going to be talking about a couple of things with Michelle in a second. But before I get into the conversation, I just want to say a couple of things. The first thing is that I've been doing this show for about a year now. So if you guys have feedback to me, I would be deeply appreciative if you give feedback because I'm always trying to become better with this podcast. It's more of a passion for me more than anything else, but I just wanted to say it up front so that if you have comments, ideas, I'm all ears. So, having said all that, I am absolutely delighted to have Michelle Robbins here with us today as our guest on the show. Um, Michelle and I have a history together, which we will talk about in a minute or two. But before we get into all that, Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, listen, Michelle, why don't we first start with with some simple questions, which is like, tell us who you are. What's your background?
Yes, so would love to share. I have started my career in marketing. Spent many years at Procter and Gamble working on brands like NyQuil, DayQuil, ZQuil, Always, and New Chapter. I've also worked at a startup and now am the SVP of marketing at Vitamin Angels. And Vitamin Angels is a public health organization working to improve nutrition for moms and kids around the world.
Amazing, amazing. What an amazing career. So, I haven't mentioned yet what we're talking about today. So let me just bring that in, which is, when I was talking to Michelle a few weeks ago, I was like, Michelle, how you and I met is actually an inspiring story for people, I think. So the topic for today is about professional networking and how that goes about it, and how should we think about that as a muscle in your mind as well as a skill set that can help you actually become effective at how you go about doing this work, right? So Michelle, why don't we start with that story? Maybe that's a good place to start, right? How did you and I connect?
Yes, Yogesh, you and I connected
Mhm,
many, many moons ago, and both of us attended University of South Carolina.
mhm.
And I still remember the day very clearly that you came into my class to speak about market research, and you were working at Procter and Gamble at the time. Gave a super inspiring, motivating talk, and at the end, you said, if you're interested in applying to Procter and Gamble, now's the time. The online application system is open.
Mhm.
So I went up to you after class. I talked to you a little bit more, and as with anything with networking, right? Kind of like
Mhm.
got up the courage to go up and talk to you, learn more about it, and honestly, that moment, right? You can see change the whole trajectory of my career, right? So
Mhm.
huge gratitude to you for coming into the classroom that day. But yeah, it was definitely a big pivotal moment for me. And ultimately, obviously, the application went through and was hired. So
Yeah, and I didn't know that you had been actually been hired. You came and told me after the fact, if I'm not mistaken, right?
yes.
Yeah, so it completely excited me because I was like, oh my gosh, I actually helped with recruiting, and oh my gosh, I helped somebody get into P&G because was it easy to get into P&G just out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, the online system, as you know, is
Yes.
many, many different applications. But I think learning from you, hearing from you, really helped me even prepare for that
Mhm.
application. So, yes, so it's definitely a big moment where you inspired me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have necessarily known about that opportunity or even thought about applying to PNG.
Right, right. So that's great. So let's kind of like get into the conversation around networking, right? Because that's what I really wanted to, pick your brains on, on this topic. So, um, as you're talking about, that's one incident that happened with me, but I'm sure you've had other incidences with other people where things have, helped you or opened doors for you along the way. So what's that arc for you if you want to, let's elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah. So Number one, I love just looking back at your career, and um, when you're in the moment, you can't necessarily predict where you're going to be 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now. But when you look back on it, you reflect and you see how all those moments helped get you to where you are. Obviously, just talking about the moment we shared together.
Mhm.
Another big moment, even taking it beyond the University of South Carolina, was a conversation that I had when I was a freshman at UMass Amherst, and big school, trying to meet new people, and happened to start up a conversation with a woman in my dorm. And she shared that she was studying Japanese. And I was totally fascinated and like had this huge aha moment. I left that conversation super inspired and actually started studying Japanese.
Hmm.
Um, I studied Japanese. I ultimately went and taught English in Japan for 2 years, where I
Hmm.
met my husband.
Wow.
And then I applied for my international MBA at University of South Carolina, where I met you. So
Mhm.
again, you can see how all these moments led to where I am today. So for me, it's about number one, following your heart, but also taking action, right? So when you have these exchanges with people, what are you doing with the information?
Mhm.
What are you taking away? What's your next step that you can take after that, right? Even the conversation with you, right? I had a choice about whether or not I was actually going to apply. The conversation with this woman I'm telling you about, I had a choice about whether or not I was going to study Japanese. So
Mhm.
I think it's following your heart and then taking action.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because I think back to my life, and those pivotal moments as well. And quite frankly, there only been like one or maybe two, maybe three choices, real choices that can change your trajectory, right? So, for me, for example, my first one was, should I go to the United States to study for
Mhm.
my undergraduate degree or not? Because I was living in Bahrain, a little island in the Persian Gulf at the time. I was going to high school there. My oldest brother convinced me to, switch from the convent school I was at in high school to an American school. So between 10th and 11th grade, I made that switch, and I was in a totally different system. So I had to I had a steep learning curve in terms of learning how to study in the American system versus having learned in the British system all that time, basically. So that for me was a pivotal choice because that got me to the U.S. eventually. Coming to NC State and South Carolina. The second big choice for me was PNG, getting into PNG, and again, a professor helped me in that situation. I would say the third one is when I got married, basically. So everything else are subsequent choices, but if you think about those pivotal choices, those were it, pretty much. So
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. And I love, as you said, I mean, you had to have the courage to take those leaps and make those choices. And sometimes it is kind of going into the unknown,
yeah.
but that's where when you get that feeling that you feel compelled to do
Mhm.
something, like
Mhm.
that's when it's a clear choice and it's a clear decision. So I love that story.
Absolutely. So let's break this down, right? So I think this is where our analytical minds now start kicking in a little bit, right? In terms of, if you were, advising somebody who's a student or somebody who's early in their career and they're trying to figure all of these things out, um, how would you start? What would be that process to start? Because courage is number one. I totally agree with you, but beyond courage, what would be those tangible things that you would suggest to people?
Yeah. So I think first is we're talking about the topic of networking, right? And
Yep.
typically people have a bit of an allergic reaction to the term networking, right? Kind of
Mhm.
conjures up feelings of like big conference rooms and awkward conversations, the exchange of the business card and, making small talk. And for me, at the heart of networking is people, right? People and building relationships and connections, right? And so if you reframe it to just trying to meet somebody, getting to know them, asking questions, and for me approaching it with just a sense of curiosity, right, is number one, which I think helps people shift out of that awkward feeling. So that's number one. I think, for me as well, it's making sure that we've talked about this, but getting out of your comfort zone, right? So getting to your green growing edge, I think that's when you know you're kind of building muscles, learning new things, and
Mhm.
you know, having the courage to reach out to somebody that might be on your work team and ask to meet up for coffee, maybe learn about the function that they're in and the differences between what you're doing in your career. So I think those are all super, super good things. The next is just starting. I think in my mind, you're always one conversation away from that next opportunity. That's the
Mhm.
way I think about it, right? Just take one step. What is that next conversation that might be the aha moment for you? It might be something that you learned that's new. It might spark a creative idea for you, right? So just taking that one simple step and not thinking about it as this huge, big project, right? So
Mhm.
engaging with somebody on LinkedIn, reaching out to them to connect, that's one step that you can take. So trying to break it down into something that's easy. So those would be some starting points, I think.
Yeah, no, those are great starting points. And, and just to add to what you're saying, especially for people who are in a corporation, large corporations, and it's intimidating when when you see hundreds of people around you and people with a lot more experience than you, especially if you're a new hire. It feels difficult, right? And I remember when I transitioned from Europe to Cincinnati with P&G. I was struggling. I was like, I didn't know who to talk to, what to talk to. And there was one associate director at the time. She kind of suggested, why don't you start reaching out to people in your particular area and talk to them? And I said, I don't even know who to talk to. So she gave me some names to start with. And what I found was the first thing I found is scheduling became a huge issue. Like people kept on pushing me back because they didn't know who I was, right? But then I kind of like had an aha moment where I was like, you know what? What if I invite them to lunch? Because everybody needs to eat lunch, and most people tend to eat at their desk, right?
Mhm.
So when I started doing that, all of a sudden I was actually getting people much more earlier than being pushed back 2, 3, 4 weeks kind of thing, basically, right? So that's a tip that I learned. Like if you're trying to network with somebody, see if you can get them over lunch. So you know but then
Yes.
the second thing that I also learned was you know you may also have them tell you who else to connect with as well. So there's a bit of a chain reaction that can start as well if they're willing to share with you context that they think you should be talking to as well. And I found that to be super effective. And all of a sudden I found my calendar filling up with meetings and talking to people, and it just turned out to be a great way to understand how the organization actually worked behind the scenes,
Yeah.
you know
I love that. And at the heart too, people want to help people, right?
Mhm.
They enjoy it. They, for them it's fulfilling. It's something that's rewarding. And so also, like you said, just thinking about it, people are happy to make introductions. Like you're talking about your manager who said, reach out to these 3 people, like
Yeah.
even just helping you get started.
Mhm.
So I think just also feeling like, because it is a relationship,
Mhm.
what are you contributing to it? How are you helping? But then, you know, understanding that for the other person, they are getting out of it too, feeling great about getting you to a new place too. So,
Absolutely. And and I just want to like acknowledge one point, like people who are a lot of people think I'm extroverted because of
mhm.
all the stuff I do, right? And it's partially true. I am extroverted, but there's a big introvert part in me as well. So for those people who tend to be more introverted, this feels even more of a daunting situation, right? But there are so many ways you can actually make it work for you as well. So, have you experienced anybody who's more of an introvert, and what would you say to them? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I think that's also a common myth, right? That extroverts are better at networking than
Mhm.
introverts. And to me, it goes back to everybody has their strengths. Everybody has different aspects that they're really, really good at.
Mhm.
And I think, when I think about somebody who may be more reserved or, less into small talk, wanting more meaningful conversations, um, for them it's like how do you network in a way that is comfortable and authentic to who you are, right? What feels natural, right? It should not feel unnatural, because at the end of the day, it's just
Yeah.
building a relationship, right? So in today's world, it's easy to reach out, like you said, for you in an email, make it introduction, approach somebody in a way that feels comfortable. Oftentimes, it's probably more one-on-one conversations that may be easier for an introvert to
Mhm.
navigate, versus kind of going into, a big room and striking up conversations with people. But I think for me, what's important is to understand and find what works for you.
Mhm.
And for me as well, like, I find it energizing going to conferences, right? But
Mhm.
ultimately, lots of those relationships you're building, maybe not as long term, right?
Mhm.
For me, it's about thinking about who is in your close ecosystem, right? At work, in groups that you belong to, places you're volunteering at,
Mhm.
that make it easier to have an ongoing relationship that you can build over time, right? So I
Yeah.
think those are the ones that are going to be most fruitful. And um, as we all know, over the years, sometimes you lose touch with that person, but you reconnect. But it becomes just a network that you can tap into. And I think, Yogesh, you and I, right, we've been connected for many, many years.
Yeah.
Over that time, staying connected on LinkedIn, catching up from time to time. And then even this opportunity, right? You reached out and asked if, hey, I'm doing this podcast. I'd love to think about whether or not, we could have you on. Like, that to me is an example of kind of really building that longer term relationship, which is for me something that I take more enjoyment and fulfillment out of than some of those more temporary conversations. So
Absolutely. And I think the key word there is relationship versus making it transactional, right?
yes.
Because transactional feels like, I'm giving you something, you're giving something back to me, or, you know, some iteration of that, right? But when you're relationship building, you know that, okay, you're investing right now. It may not come back to you for some period of time, or a very long period of time in some cases, right? But it'll come back in some way, right? And just believing in that and believing in human nature, I think makes a big difference, in my opinion. Um, uh, in terms of, you put, positive vibes into the universe, eventually it comes back to you as well. Right? So
It's so true. And I think that is another piece to remember, is like, you're investing in the relationship, right? What are you bringing to the table? How can you add value? And then, as you said, down the road, it might be you have reach out for some advice, or you need some help at a different time. So
yeah.
I think that's great.
Amazing, right? So, so people maybe think, okay, that's, networking, and we kind of, like, talked about why it's important, but I think there's even a little bit more in there too, right? I think you have a couple of stories around that I thought you wanted to talk about, as to why this is such a critical skill set to have.
It is critical. And one story I'll share is, a lot of times we think about networking and, building relationships, people in your organization, et cetera. But one conversation that I think was really helpful to me, just in terms of thinking about managing your career, I remember, was at a manager level and talking to my manager, trying to get some career advice. And she recommended that I go and speak to a general manager at the time. And this general manager happened to be moving on and going on to an international assignment. And um, I was thinking, why does she want me to go and talk to, my two up manager? This is, going to be awkward conversation. I'll have to go in there. I'm going to ask her for career advice. And so actually reached out to my friends at work, prepared for the conversation, and um, went in asking her for advice on what would be helpful. And what she shared with me is, you know what, Michelle, what you need is a career sponsor. And I was like, what's a career sponsor, right? And she's like, well, it's somebody who's going to advocate for you and help, kind of bring you into conversations around, next steps, new roles. Um, and I was thinking in my head, like, isn't that what my manager does? Like, isn't that what my manager is supposed to do? And while your manager clearly has a role and clearly helps, um, you need to be influencing up, down, and across, right? And this was influencing up, right? And um, I think we tend to kind of heads down, do our work, think that maybe our manager is sharing and making that visible. But to me, the big takeaway was number one, making sure that you are visible in the organization, that your work is visible in the organization, and then building those relationships with senior leaders in the organization. That's key. It could be reaching out to a senior leader that might be in a different business unit. It could be the senior leader, you're in a presentation and sharing your work with them, right? Those are all moments where you can really help influence and build connections and ultimately find somebody who will be an advocate for you and will become a sponsor to helping you in your career. So
Yeah.
I think for me, what was so helpful about that conversation was just her openness and willingness to share this, that
Mhm.
it was so intuitive for her, but as you said, for me was a complete unknown in terms of this being an opportunity for me to be aware of.
You're reminding me of something that again, you probably got exposed to this at P&G as well. So we're making a lot of P&G references here because of the fact that the two of us worked there, but we also have worked at other companies as well. So we'll bring that in at some point as well. But there was this acronym that I remember learning called PI, where I think it stood for performance, image, exposure. I think that's what it stood for. So you control your performance, right? So what you do, day in and day out in terms of your contributions to your job determines how people perceive you, right? And that's the image part of it. But then there are some people who will actually open doors and give you exposure, like the example that you just gave right now, right? So I would encourage people, it doesn't matter how, whether you're new to your career or you're an experienced person, you should be thinking about the PI principle. What's your performance? What image are you putting into the workplace? And then who are the people that are going to be who could potentially give you exposure? And in this case, there was a person who came to you and said, talk to this one, to this manager. That was the exposure right there, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, and
Yeah.
I've seen this happen time and again, and that really makes a huge difference, because everyone, doesn't matter how smart you are or how collaborative you are, everyone needs a helping hand in their careers at the end of the day, in my opinion. So tell me a couple of things around, we can talk about like career trajectory. That's one part of it where professional networking helps. But what about also content and becoming better at your job? Have you ever used networking to help you from that perspective?
Mm-hmm. Uh, yeah, I think for me, that is one huge piece of getting to know other people, learning from other people, and in my career, those conversations, right?
Mhm.
Everyone kind of adds, stretches your thinking, and really helps you grow professionally. So, yes, career, as you said, is important, but I remember a partner, cross-functional partner I had in R&D, together working with him, really learning about the product side of the business, how we think about innovation plans, right? That
Mhm.
was super, super helpful and really helps you expand your horizons, and actually became an area that I wanted to pursue in my career and work more on innovation opportunities, consumer insights, getting to know people. And so it kind of opens up, I think, other ways that you can think about where you might have passion to continue growing in your career too.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense because I can think of multiple occasions in my career where others have helped me grow and learn about different areas. A very quick story. I This happened in Chicago to me about 10 years ago. I got really fascinated about the Internet of Things.
Hmm.
I had heard the term; it sounded really interesting, but I knew nothing about it. Right. So there was these meetup groups that would happen here in Chicago. There's an app called Meetup, right? And I started showing up at this particular meetup event that was related to IoT, and there were like 100 people in the room. I didn't know anybody there, and they're talking about topics that I had no clue what they meant. They were talking about Sigfox and Azure and you know cloud services and things like that. 10 years ago, these were still some new topics in my mind, right? And I wasn't really that techie of a person to understand. And quite frankly, I could have easily walked out of that meeting that day and say, I'm not going to go back to it again. But I said, let me just stick with it. And I ended up going about 3 or 4 more times, and I started meeting people, and they started talking to me. I started talking to them, and all of a sudden, they were then teaching me all the things about IoT. And before I knew it, I was being invited to speak at that event to those 100 people about the role of IoT and marketing. And I'm like, oh my God, like, how did I get myself roped into this? But it was a huge eye opener for me in terms of how just one little thing of just going to a place where I knew nothing about, and then the knowledge I acquired through that group, through, call it osmosis if you want, but it just helped me become so much more knowledgeable about a space that I knew nothing about at all.
Right. And helped you grow and expand your skill set, right? Which at the end of
Exactly.
the day is super important, and something that on your own you might not necessarily have thought to even pursue, as you said. So I think that's where, it goes back to taking action. Like you said, like, are you going to do something with that information? And ultimately becoming a speaker on the panel is an awesome way to recognize that you truly, chase that. So that's great.
Ex- Exactly, right. So let's talk about, if you were to make it really pragmatic, right, in terms of, hey, if you wanted to build out a networking strategy, right, what would be your strategy, or what would be the advice you would give people who are listening to this podcast?
Yeah. So for me, if we take a page from the marketing framework, right? If we think about, first, you know, what is the landscape? What's your why? What is your goal? What are areas that you're interested in learning about? As we said, is it about continuing to grow your skill set? Is it something that you want to, find out more about a new career path? So first is starting with, what is your goal? What are ways that you want to, leverage and building relationships? Next is who. So as we talked, like, who are the people that you think might be great to reach out to? Doing some research, are there thought leaders on LinkedIn that you might want to start following and seeing what information they share? Are there work groups you can join to continue to have that dialogue? Next is what. So what is your message, right? And I think here it's being really clear and specific in what your ask may be to that person, right? So maybe it is something that you're considering, a career change and wanting to get perspective. That happened to me at P&G. I had somebody who was in a different function and was interested in learning more about marketing and reached out to me to have a conversation about it, learn more. And those are great conversations to have, right, as you're evaluating what a career change may be. And then next is how. So where are you going to reach them, right? What's the best way to get in touch with them? Is it somebody that you know that can make a warm introduction for you? Is it reaching out to somebody via email in your organization? So those are all ways to think about how you might structure an approach to building that first step relationship. So
Right. No, that's a great framework to use, the who, what, how, right? In terms of who you're targeting, what is your message, and how will you reach them, so
mhm.
you can start connecting. I think that makes a lot of sense, but I think people sometimes don't even know how to even find out who I should reach out to. So do you have any tips around how would you even do that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always starting one with people that you already know, right? So
Mhm.
having conversations with them, as you said, it could even be, a person that works in a different company, like, that might have other ideas, people that you can reach out to. That was something, a person that I had known many, many years ago reached out to me and was starting up her business, right? And wanted to talk to me about what I knew from, my experience. And for me, I was able to share with her some contacts that I thought could be helpful, that might be interested in what her business proposition was about, right? So even though we had known each other since college, like that conversation really helped us together think about ways that I could help her with her business. So I think it's just starting with those conversations to kind of do some research. Is step one. And then two, as we said, kind of, I mean, LinkedIn is a huge resource to use, but to tap into your network on LinkedIn and, reach out to other people and, really start those conversations there as well.
No, that's right. That makes a lot of sense. Sometimes people forget that they actually have more resources that are available to them than not. So, simple example, for those of you who have gotten degrees from any university or college, right? They have an alumni group.
Yeah.
Leveraging the alumni group might be an interesting way to start. Maybe there are some industry forums that you might find interesting, for example, or conferences that you may have gone to. People's names are usually posted on those conference web pages. That's a list of names right there that people could tap into as well. I'm sure people who are on the conference presenting may not like me for saying that, but it is the reason why they're doing it in the first place to a certain degree, right? So,
Yes.
but there are ways like that, simple things like that you could do to find the right profile of people that you want to connect with, basically, right? Are there other tips like that you've come across?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And I think the alumni group, as you said, is a huge one. I know UMass Amherst has a women's group. I went to one of their meetings that they had in Boston, and it was a huge opportunity. I met two women who were starting out in their careers. We were able to meet afterwards and have a conversation about what they were thinking, what were good next steps, and was rewarding for me just to be part of that. But I think it's, like you said, giving back, but that was a great way to connect and to meet other women who were part of that UMass alumni group. So I think those are great ideas.
Are there any no-nos that you have come across, like, please don't do this because this is not going to work? I have one, but I'm curious to hear if you have any.
I do have one example where, so number one, like we said, it's all about like taking that initiative, getting going, right? We all started with 0 followers on LinkedIn at some point, right? We all
Yep,
started with 0.
absolutely.
And what's great, so one example is this was somebody who was on my team and went to an event with some senior leaders, made a connection with one of the senior leaders there. But this is a very senior leader. Okay. Afterwards, he sent a nice thank you note, which is perfect, right? Thank you. It was really great meeting you. I, took away ABC, and then he wanted to go to lunch with this person. You had talked about going to lunch, right? That's a great way to kind of make that connection. But then he wasn't like hearing anything back, right? Okay, so you might think, oh, he's busy. He's, hasn't got the time. After like 8 times of relentlessly trying to schedule a meeting, right? That's when it's gone too far, right? I call that like the point of diminishing returns. And so knowing when you've gone from kind of, being in that trying to reach out and connect to being completely annoying and in someone's face, right? So I think that's where, again, just knowing when to say, I'm going to give this some space. I might pick it up later, but just picking up on those social cues, I think it goes back to, right, emotional intelligence. Like they don't want to meet with you, right? So so that's one example of where you might just be taking it many steps too far. So
So that's really good, because that's related to the who and the how of how you're doing this. I have an example from a what perspective,
okay, great.
and this actually happened to me in the last 4 weeks. Somebody from some other somebody I don't know reached out to me on LinkedIn, and the first thing he said to me was, "Can you help me find a job?" That was a starting sentence in that. I'm like, I don't even know who you are. I don't know your background. I don't know what's your interest areas. Like, we have no relationship here. So leading with, can you help me find a job, which is the ask. I get that, but if you lead with that, like, it's a total turnoff. I'm like, why would I help you? Like, you've not made any effort to get to know me, or to at least allow yourself to get known to me, and you're already making an ask. And I think that's another big no-no in my mind. Like, build a relationship first before you actually, make the ask. Or more hope, or better still, the person themselves will be like, hey, are you looking for a job? That's like the ultimate, because that you've got them to the point where they want to help you, which is what I think would be the best situation. I don't know, what do you think about my thoughts on that? Is that reasonable or unreasonable?
100%. And I think that's where networking gets a bad rap, right? Like, I mean, we
Yeah,
all have
exactly.
those examples where, and that is highly transactional, right? And if we think
Yeah.
about the heart of what we're talking about, which is building a relationship, it should be win-win, right?
Yeah.
Like, there has to be something
Mhm.
that you're bringing to the table, that you're contributing. Um, and somebody reaching out like that just
Mhm.
is so off-putting, right? So I agree that it's like, and again, it goes back to just having that EQ to know that,
Yeah.
maybe he could have reached out and just said, I'm really enjoying your podcast. There was one topic in particular that I thought was really great, and
Mhm.
if you have a chance, I'd love to connect and learn more about it, right? Like, that would be a good way to engage you and start the conversation. And then
Exactly.
maybe he's interested in a career in that area, and you could make an intro for him. But
Mhm.
to just start with, give me a job. I mean, if it were that easy, right? Like, yeah, no, no.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, I love the point you're making about having high EQ in this case, because that is exactly what's needed
Yeah.
to make you successful. But at the same time, within EQ, there are actually two parts to it. There's the social awareness part of it. There's also the personal awareness as well, in terms of, you know, am I doing it right? There's all this fear, right, and this anxiety of, am I doing it right? Am I good enough? Am I, why would this person talk to me? These are all mental,
Mhm.
barriers that I'm sure everybody has faced at some point in time, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I call those unhelpful thoughts, right? Those are unhelpful thoughts, and
Yeah.
we all have unhelpful thoughts. And I think, um, for me, what's important, it goes back to, what I shared earlier, is that people want to help people, right?
Hmm.
They enjoy helping people. And I think for you to keep that in mind. And
Hmm.
also, what if they say yes, right? What if they say yes to the conversation? What if there's a new opportunity you never even knew was possible because of that, right? And I think that's where, um, more often than not, that is where the conversation is going to land, right? Unless, as we said, you're starting from a point of like, give me a job, or like 8 times I'm asking you, right? So,
Yeah.
um, more often than not, I mean, the conversations I've had, some have been more productive than others, but they all contribute in some way. And I think that's what's important, is to try and not let those unhelpful thoughts kind of take over and paralyze you into not taking action, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is the most important piece, is that you just have to think of it as just one step. And you and I both know, like you said, you might not hear back from them, it might
Yeah.
be weeks, like you might have to follow up again. But and then you're thinking, oh my gosh, maybe they don't want to connect, maybe they don't want to meet with me. But
Hmm.
lots of times, you know people are busy, they have other priorities coming up, right? It might just be like not a great time right now. So I think also not making up kind of those movies in your head about what is going on, because you don't know the reality of what that person may be in the middle of themselves. So
Yeah. Yeah, because life can take over. Like, things can happen personally, whatever it is, right? So it just mean the timing may not be right. So it's, in a way, it's almost like dating, right? In the
yeah,
sense that if the timing has to work for both sides to
yeah,
make it work, right?
yes,
So I
and
get that. What about, as we're talking through this, it kind of like got me thinking also about the fact that, people, um, put extraordinary pressure on themselves, that, oh, I have to be reaching out all the time. There's that group of people as well. There's some who just don't do it, and
mhm.
they need to be nudged to do something. But then there are others who feel like that they constantly be doing it all the time. Have you come across people like that? What are your thoughts on, on how to manage or navigate people like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think we all have, again, it goes back to what feels right for you and where you are in terms of wanting to build your network, right? There's
Yeah,
different moments where that's going to be more of a focus for you than others, right?
yeah,
So as we talked, like you might be graduating from college and starting the job search, going to recruiting fairs, going to the career center, right?
yeah,
Starting to set up your LinkedIn profile. That's like a deeper investment where you're really going to be trying to make more connections.
mhm,
So I think it's really for me too at different times in my life that's been more important than not. But
mhm,
what is important is being consistent and continuing to nurture those relationships over time. So and I think nowadays it makes it really easy where you can, pop
mhm,
onto LinkedIn, engage with somebody, congratulate them on a promotion or a career
mhm.
milestone. Those are ways that you can kind of continue to be sort of present for
Yeah,
people. And honestly, for me, it's because you care, you're excited. I mean, I love seeing people that I've worked with in the past who continue to soar and rise in their careers. Like
mhm,
it's super exciting. And so I think, that is, one way to think about it, that I wouldn't necessarily feel like, oh, I have to like 5 connections a month, right? It really
yeah.
depends on where you are, but making sure that you are continuing to sustain and nurture
Mhm.
is important. So taking time to invest in that.
So, having said all this stuff, right? I want to bring it back to the two of us because we started this conversation about you and me and how we met, and how one conversation led to you, getting on a career path and career trajectory that, quite frankly, none of us could have predicted that, including
Mhm.
you, right? But how did all this stuff come back? So, yes, this podcast is something that we've been doing. We planned this a couple of months ago, and now here we are doing it. But there's something else also that you're now doing with me, right? On behalf of the university. Um, why don't you tell the audience what is that connection where I helped you a long time ago, and now you're helping me after almost 20 plus years, right? So what is that?
Yes, I love this story. I am now, serving as a board member on the Center for Marketing Solutions at the University of South Carolina. And as you said, very, very grateful to you and grateful to have this opportunity to be giving back, helping provide perspective and contributing and continuing to build, right, the marketing at University of South Carolina. So really, really excited to be part of that. And we had our first board meeting last week. The
Yeah.
CMO Summit is coming up in October, which is very, very exciting. And
Mhm.
like you said, kind of full circle from where we started. And yeah.
Yeah, and and this is the value of networking right here, right? Because um, you know, um, people can say, "Oh, oh, Michelle got all the help from Yogesh, but what did she really do?" Well, guess what? 20 plus years later, she's now helping me with with planning for the board, being being a board member, helping with the summit. All these things are big deals for me right now, and you, Michelle, being there to help alongside the rest of the board is incredibly valuable to me at this point in time. So I want to first of all thank you publicly that you're doing this, because obviously it's a commitment of your time, but it's also a testament to the fact that we've built up this relationship over the years that's allowing us to do these things together now, basically as well, right? So for me, for me this is full circle right here, and that's why I wanted us to have this conversation on this podcast so that people can see this is why it's so important at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So
I love that, and I love this story. And again, as you said, it's all comes down to one moment that leads to the next moment. And
yeah,
yeah, very, very excited to be continuing the journey with you. So
absolutely, absolutely. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for this, this conversation today. I know people are going to be listening to this, and they'll be having their questions, eventually. which feel free to post your questions on the comments section. Here on LinkedIn. This is also available on YouTube as well as Spotify, so you can hear it anytime you want. Um, I want to just end by saying that if you want to follow Michelle or follow me, please go ahead and connect with us on LinkedIn. Our profiles are connected on this particular link here as well, so you can. It's easy to follow us or to connect with us if you're interested. The last thing I'll say, our next podcast is on September 12th with Ben Gaffney. He's the co-founder of McCoy. It's an innovative startup that helps, excuse me, that helps job seekers, where he's using AI to help you actually translate or to shift your 2D resume into something that's a little bit more 3D. So um, I will not do it justice in this at this point in time, but it's worth listening to what he's working on. And he's got an incredible CMO as well, who's supporting his business, JT O'Donnell, who's she's an amazing speaker in her own right, where she talks about giving tips for job seekers. So with Ben coming in and representing his company on the next one, it'll be really worth listening into. That's on September 12th, same time, 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you can join us. So Michelle, thank you again. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Yogesh.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.